I've found a practical use for the edge-to-edge mode. I don't quilt any quilts, actual projects, using the edge-to-edge mode, but I do use the edge-to-edge mode to do my setup for the edge-to-edge project because I like the way the edge-to-edge mode does the adjustment of the pattern. I have this designed by Deb, Just Roses set up. I'm going to quilt this on a quilt. Start and end are at the bottom, or at the top rather. They are at the top. So when I quilt this first row, after I convert it to edge to edge and repeat patterns, I get to the end of the row. I'll cut to bobbin thread. I'll click OK. I'll let the machine move to the start point of the second row, take a stitch, pull up the bobbin thread, hit stop, then I'll mark that point. That's going to be my point to do the next relocate. So let me show you how I'm going to make this into a repeat patterns edge to edge project. I'm just going to right click. Where I right click is not really that important as long as it's on the CAD screen somewhere. And I'm going to go down and select relocate, shift all to one point. I have my end snap turned on. It says OK. If I do this, it's going to convert this to a edge to edge and repeat patterns, and yes, I want to do that. I'll click yes, turn on my end snap. Now this is the point I want to use to relocate. It's the start point of the first repeat in the first row. I left click the mouse and I'll follow the instructions that comes up next. I'll click yes. I really want to do this. It tells me up here on the screen, it says repeat patterns edge to edge, and notice it has changed everything to repeat patterns edge to edge. I'm going to delete this boundary because I don't really need it, and I'm going to also adjust the sides of the quilt. I'm going to use the crosshair to adjust the left side and the right side to make sure that this is not going to quilt off of the quilt, or it's not going to stop before it gets to the edge of the quilt. I have the machine sitting on the right edge of the quilt, and as you can see, this pattern is going to stitch off the side a little bit. I don't want it to do that, so I'm going to use the wedge and push this back in just a little bit, just so it doesn't stitch off the edge, and that looks good. The first row is finished, and I have pulled up the bobbin thread and cut it. Now I'm going to click OK and let the machine go to the start point of the first repeat in the second row. It's going to go right here. When I click OK, the machine is going to move to the start point of the first repeat in this second row. It's going to move right to this point and take a stitch. I followed the instructions. I pulled up the bobbin thread, and I can't quilt this row, so I'm going to click stop. Then I'm going to mark this spot right here. I'm going to take that bobbin thread, I'm going to wrap it around the pin, secure it so I don't lose my thread. Then I'll use that as my point to relocate, shift all to one point to move all the patterns in position to quilt the next. The quilt has been rolled. Now I have to do a relocate. I'm going to right click and I'm going to use relocate, shift all to one point. I let the machine go to this start point of the second row and take the stitch. But now I've rolled the quilt, and all of this row here, the first row, is on the take-up roller. So now I have to relocate all of the patterns on the screen to the correct point for the next row to stitch. I'm zoomed way in. I'm going to right click and I'm going to select relocate, Shift all to one point. My end snap is on. I'm going to let it snap to the start point of the first repeat in the second row. I'm going to click that point with the left click it with the mouse. Then I'll follow the instructions. Click yes. Creative Studio has relocated all of the patterns in this quilt group, and it's ready to start stitching the second row. But first I'm going to check the left edge and the right edge to make sure that they are going to fall within the boundary of the edge of the quilt the way I want. I have adjusted the right edge of the quilt to get the ending of the repeat to line up with the edge of the quilt the way I want it to. Now I'm ready to quilt the next row. I have set up another edge-to-edge quilt group, and this time I'm going to use Linda Taylor's Feather Meandering, which has the start and end at the bottom. And I know that this pattern quilts best at about -0.7. So I'm going to set in my vertical spacing down here, -0.7. And I click OK. In this box I enter the quilt length, 97. Now I just let Creative Studio do all the calculations. Creative Studio has finished calculating the repeats and the rows and put everything in the box. Now, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to click Quilt and let the machine go to the start point of this first row and take a stitch. Then I'm going to hit stop, and I'm going to convert this to an edge to edge in repeat patterns. The machine moved to the start point of the first row, took a stitch. I'm going to click stop, and it gives me the warning, you haven't finished. Do you really want to do this? Yes, I do. Then I'm going to go up here and I'm going to right click. Again, where I right click is very not important at all. It's unimportant. All I want to do is get this drop down menu so I can relocate. Shift all to one point. End snap is on. I'm going to let it snap to the end point. Well, it's going to give me my whole scenario here. Yes, I do want to convert this to edge to edge and repeat patterns. I click yes. Then it's going to tell me to click on the point on the CAD screen. This is the point I want. It's the start point of this row. I click on that, and I click yes because the machine is sitting at the correct place. I did not move it. Now I've shifted this to edge to edge in repeat patterns. Again, I would check the right edge with my crosshair and make sure everything is aligned. Well, the only difference in this and the project I was just working on, the start and end is at the bottom of this particular pattern, and the start and end in the previous quilt group was at the top. So I have to handle this a little bit different. In this, with the start and end at the top, I can simply quilt the row and then cut the bobbin thread, click OK, let the machine go to the start point of the second row, take a stitch, mark that point, roll the quilt, use that point to relocate, shift all to one point. I have to do it a little differently in this group where the start and end is at the bottom. I'll quilt the first row. When we get to the end of this first row and the machine tells me to pull up the bobbin thread, I'll do that. I'll cut the thread, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'll click OK and let the machine start to move towards the start point of the second row. I know I can't go to that point because the machine is going to crash into the rollers. So as soon as the machine starts to move, I will click stop, and then I'll click stop again. Okay, you say, well, how are you going to get this stuff relocated? Well, I'm going to use the start point of the first repeat in the first row to do my relocate. Now, after I quilt this first row, stop the machine from moving, roll the quilt, this point right here is going to be way up next to the take-up roller. So I move my machine up to that point where the actual point now is. This point is actually way up there because I've rolled the quilt, and this is on the roll around the take-up roller. So, okay, it's simple. I just go ahead, right-click to give me my drop-down menu, and I go ahead and select relocate, shift all to one point. Remember, this point is way up next to the take-up roller. I left click, I click yes, and Creative Studio will do all the calculations, and it will move all the patterns in place. Now this point, this is around the take-up roller, remember, and this point is near the take-up roller. So when I click quilt, the machine is going to move down to the start point of this second row, take a stitch, pull up the bobbin thread, click OK, and it's going to tie off and start stitching the second row. That is how easy it is to use repeat patterns in edge to edge. So it doesn't matter if the start point is at the top or the bottom. I can use relocate, shift all to one point. I have set up another edge to edge quilt group, and I did this one because the start and end are in between the top and the bottom of the design. So we've done one with the start and end at the top, the start and end at the bottom. Now we have one with the start and end in between. I click quilt, and the machine moved to the start point of the first repeat in the first row. I'm going to click stop, and Creative Studio is going to come up with a message: you haven't finished. Okay, are you sure you want to stop? Yes, I do. And now I'm going to do my relocate again, since the machine is sitting right there at the start point of the first repeat in the first row. I'm going to right click, I'm going to relocate, shift all to one point, and it says, okay, give me my message. Using relocate converts this quilt group to edge repeat patterns. Do you want to do this? Yes. Then it's going to give me a place. It's going to say click on the known point. Well, that's the known point right there, the start point of the first repeat, the first row. I'll click on it, left click with the mouse. I'll click yes, and there we are. We're in repeat patterns edge to edge, and I'm going to do this a little different. When I quilt the first row here, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the bobbin thread, cut the bobbin thread. Now on some patterns, you can, if you have enough room, reach the start point of the next row, but in this case I can't reach the start point of the next row. So after this is finished quilting, I'll show you how to relocate it. First row has finished quilting, and I cut the bobbin thread and I clicked OK. Let the machine start to move. Click stop, then click stop again. Now I roll the quilt, and after I roll the quilt, this bottom edge of this first row is way up here close to the take-up roller. Quilt's been rolled, and this bottom edge along here is way up close to the take-up roller. So to relocate, I'm going to shift all to one point. Since this has a star in it, this has a sharp point, and this is a good place to use the relocate. I'll just right click to get my drop down. I'll use shift all, relocate, shift all to one point. And then I'm going to turn off my end snap because it's not going to work in this case. And I'm going to click left click right on the point of this star, and the needle is sitting at that point. Then I'm just going to click yes when it comes up, and Creative Studio is going to shift all of these patterns. And Creative Studio shifted all the patterns, and this is really right along the edge of that bottom row, which is close to the take-up roller. And now I'm ready to quilt the second row. All I have to do now is hit quilt, and the machine will move to this point and take a stitch. Okay, the machine's moved, it's taken the stitch, and if I'll hit stop at this point, you're going to see that the needle, this crosshair indicates that the needle is right here at the start point of the first repeat, and